Shocking. The 1942 artifact that activated in 2026. He's alone on midnight shift when the ring lights. Coolant lines start to sing, gauges jump, and a soft glow rolls around the inner track like it's breathing. A tone presses into his teeth. No sound, just pressure. Then the meters lock into a 3-5-8 rhythm. He writes, it's talking, hands shaking. Alarms pop down the hall. He doesn't touch it. 2 polygraphs later, same sequence, same words. If this is a network, there are more nodes, and some might already be awake. The Navy buried the first recovery. But a 550-knot track keeps pointing back to one place, the Santa Monica Basin. The night Los Angeles fired on the sky. Air raid sirens claw the dark. Searchlights rake the clouds like white knives. Then the guns open up, thousands of rounds, thuds that roll through floors and into ribs. It's February 25th, 1942, and people think the war just found Los Angeles. The orders are simple: blackout, shelter, wait. Windows go dark. Neighbors whisper from stoops. Dogs won't stop barking. Up on a hill, a young radar operator leans over a scope he barely trusts. The set is an SCR-268, the Army's early warning workhorse with a rated reach of around 22 miles, maybe a bit more if the night is kind. He's been told to expect slow bombers, not what he's seeing now. The returns don't walk in steady. They jump, sharp, then gone, then back again, like something darting past the beam. Someone yells for an azimuth. He calls it breathing hard. Here's the thing. The first blip they log paints a long way out, about 120 miles to the west. That number doesn't make sense for the set. He writes it anyway. Down below, the city looks up into a sky turned into a stage. White cones of light converge on something they swear is there. Then it slides, like a shadow that refuses to hold still. Anti-aircraft bursts stitch arcs over Santa Monica Bay. Shells fall back as hot metal rain. Roofs take hits. Porches splinter. Insurance agents will have a long spring. On the docks, rumor runs faster than orders. Sailors talk about a black smear on the water, oil where it shouldn't be, and nets being towed out at first light. Fishermen who broke blackout to watch from the breakwater say they saw a glow on the surface that moved against the current, lazy but wrong, like a lantern under fog glass. They get quiet when officers walk by. Inside the plotting room, phones won't stop ringing. The operator's hands don't stop shaking. He isn't alone. Other crews are seeing echoes that sprint, then vanish. The log calls them multiple returns at impossible speeds. The term doesn't exist yet, but the shape of the night does. It's chaos mapped to instruments that can't agree with themselves. The radar story will be argued for decades, but the young man at the screen won't argue. He tapes his pencil to the edge, so he won't lose it when the next call comes. By dawn, the official story starts to bend. First it's enemy planes, then it's weather balloons, then it becomes something softer, nerves, jitters, lights on clouds. The press prints photos of light caught in smoke and calls it proof. People who pulled shrapnel out of their lawn shake their heads. Meanwhile, down the coast, tugs make slow grids across water the guns had churned all night, and a barge with a crane noses south at sunrise. What nobody outside the piers hears. Harbor logs flag an unusual oil sheen stretching over the basin's drop-off and note nets section to match a deep contour line, not the usual harbor gates. Someone draws a small circle west of Redondo, no legend. In the margin of a diver's memo, a phrase slips through, smooth radius object, half buried. It reads like a man writing fast before he's told not to. Get this, you can draw a line from the searchlights to the shelf edge and land right over the Santa Monica Basin, where the continental shelf breaks clean and the submarine canyons catch anything that falls. Thermal layers stack there like glass panes. Sound bends and hides. If you wanted to lose a thing in plain sight, you'd drop it right there. And if something fell under those lights, the basin would keep it secret. The city does what scared cities do. It hardens. The fear of invasion becomes policy. The story narrows to things people can live with. The guns quiet. The sirens die. Official lines settle like dust. People go back to work with roofs patched and questions tucked away. Insurance claims spike for damage caused by our own shells. The paper blames enemy ghosts and moves on. Across town, a mother picks copper shards out of her garden with a spoon and wraps them in cloth for a drawer. She'll keep them until she dies. While all that is happening above water, the Navy starts looking down. Navy intelligence, the quiet kind, shows up without uniforms that shout. They don't argue about what the searchlights saw. They follow currents and rumors. They take cranes to places cranes don't usually go. By the next week, there's less talk on the dock and more fence tape. Here's the part that sticks like a burr. One line in the harbor log that almost no one noticed then, and hardly anyone can find now. It marks a time, just before dawn, when a line of floats out past the usual nets got moved. No reason given, just a move order and a coordinate that will matter later. If you trace that coordinate and the depth, you hit a canyon lip where fishermen swear their engines sometimes hum like they're passing a live wire. So the night Los Angeles fired at the sky turns into a morning the water swallows. The guns wrote an answer we could see. The basin, maybe, wrote one we weren't meant to. And if you believe the young operator's 120-mile contact on a set that wasn't built to see that far, then the first line in this story doesn't start over the city at all. It starts out past the lights, over dark water, heading for a shelf that drops into quiet. Santa Monica Basin, where the fire fell into the sea. While sirens faded, tugs traced slow boxes on a map only a few men had seen. South of the breakwater, the seabed stops behaving like a beach and drops. The Santa Monica Basin doesn't ease you down, it steps off a cliff. The shelf ends, then a black bowl opens, ribbed by submarine canyons that run like fingers toward deep water. Cold layers settle over warm ones. Sound bends, hides, doubles back. It's an acoustic funhouse, and trust me, that matters. Harbor logs from that week show work that doesn't fit cleanup. One entry flags an unusual oil sheen trending southwest across the drop-off, not the harbor's usual slicks. Another notes nets section to deep contour, which isn't how you block a channel, it's how you fence a slope. These aren't public minutes, they're working scribbles with coffee rings. Someone was mapping depth, not traffic. Fishermen on the Redondo Pier talk different. They remember a glow on the water that didn't ride the current. It moved slow, then stopped, like a lantern under milk glass. Nobody wrote that in a report you can cite. They said it to each other while gutting fish, and then they shut up when uniforms walked by. But wait, multiple boats, separate nights, same detail. The glow drifted up current. Either the ocean changed its mind, or something pushed a layer of water around itself. Navy tugs ran night grids that week, steady and tight, like measuring a backyard with a ruler. A barge with a crane left the channel before dawn, not north toward scrap, south toward open water. If you follow the line they steamed and lay it over bathymetry charts, the path kisses the canyon lip that catches whatever falls off the shelf. It's where debris goes to vanish, because once it drops past the thermocline, your eyes and ears lie. Get this, down there, a ton of steel can sound like a whisper, and a small smooth thing can ring like a bell. A diver's memo, the one with the rushed margin note, mentions a smooth radius object, half buried. Not jagged, not torn, curved like it was made to meet pressure, not resist it. Half buried means it didn't hit like wreckage. It settled. The memo doesn't say recovery. It says survey complete, recommends sectioning. Then the replies stop. Meanwhile, coastal currents kept laying that oil sheen along a contour instead of smearing it thin. That's odd. Oil wants to spread. Unless it's riding a temperature seam or a boundary you can't see. The basin is full of those stacked layers that act like invisible roads. If something made a field, even a weak one, it could trap microbubbles in film. You wouldn't see a wake. You'd see a halo. By midweek, the cranes aren't using public docks. They're tied off to temporary pads that show up in procurement slips as portable footings and salt-resistant housings. The shapes ordered, ring diameters in odd increments, look boring until you set them against a sketch from a 1943 bench test, labeled with a phrase nobody explains. Asymmetry lock. Different context, same geometry, concentric rings, honeycomb channels, non-ferrous lattice. If you're sectioning a smooth radius object, you build rings to hold it without biting into it. Here's where the basin helps the cover. Acoustic layers bounce engine noise down and away. You can run a winch a mile offshore and sound like wind on a bluff. The canyons catch your mistakes, and the slope hides your cable shadows. You don't need a storm to erase your tracks. The thermocline does it for you. No debris came ashore that matched enemy planes. The official line leaned on that like a crutch, but no debris found on land leaves a big door open. Where did the light go when the searchlights lost it? Where did the shrapnel story end when it stopped falling? The basin offers one answer, down and quiet. One more thing, and it's a small line that won't leave. A dockworker swore he watched a net float shift at dawn, not inward to clear a channel, outward to fence nothing anyone could see. He didn't have the words for canyon lip, He had tide tables and a sense for when water feels wrong under a hull. He said his engine hummed different over that mark, like the boat had driven across a live wire. Years later, a sport diver logged an underwater structure, too smooth to be rock, on a slate he never turned in. You stack these scraps, oil on a depth line, nets to contour, a glow moving against current, and the basin stops being background. It becomes the stage floor, the trapdoor, and maybe the hand that reached up and took something the city couldn't explain. The paper trail that almost vanished, O&I fragments. To get the truth, you follow paper, or what's left of it. So we filed and waited, and got back boxes that looked fat until you opened them. Whole sections were gone, page counts that jumped, paragraphs painted black like someone took a roller to meaning. FOIA denials came with cheerful form letters. What slipped through read like a puzzle with half the edges missing. But 3 phrases kept surviving the redactions like weeds pushing through concrete. Project Harbor Glass, Node 3, and hydrodynamic wakes. They show up in margins, shipping slips, and dull memos about temporary coastal works. Not front and center, off to the side like a clerk tried to erase a name and only smudged it. Harbor Glass sounded like salvage. Node 3 sounded like placement. Hydrodynamic wakes shouldn't be in paperwork if nothing moved. The first intact breadcrumb sits on a logistics slip dated March 1942. Sealed cargo, restricted handlers, destination San Nicolas Island. The line item number jumps a sequence, off-ledger accounting, the kind you use when you don't want auditors asking why a barge needed a night crane and a security cordon. The manifest doesn't say what was in the crate. It says weight to displacement ratio non-standard, and that the deck crew was issued anti-corrosion grease not from any catalog we can find. Meanwhile, a procurement order slides through in 1943 for non-ferrous lattice and dielectric fluids. The language is weird, forbidden alloying elements and blend per prior spec. Non-ferrous lattice isn't Navy vernacular. You order bronze, aluminum, copper. Lattice is lab talk. The fluid spec pops again in 1951, 1968, 1991. Same blend, same vendor chain shell, always routed through cover names that fold 2 years later. If you're topping off coolant on a dead project, you don't do it every 20 years like clockwork. You do it because something needs babysitting. Then there are the notes nobody was supposed to see. A memo from an O&I section chief with tidy handwriting has a margin scrawl. Speed observation exceeds torp class by 5. 8x, don't cable. That's not Cold War bravado. In 1943, a torpedo class ran tens of knots. 5 to 8 times that pushes you toward 500 plus in water. Write that in a cable and it lives forever. He knew better. He wrote it in pencil where a clerk might miss it. And get this, those same files explicitly reference the Army's SCR 268 set limits while logging contacts way beyond them, which is why that line says don't cable. It steps on the official range story. Another addendum, misfiled with Sonar maintenance, references a bench test protocol labeled asymmetry lock. The body text is boilerplate, pulse trials, envelope stability, but the label keeps echoing. Asymmetry lock reads like a keying trick, a way to break a perfect pattern on purpose, so a receiver knows the signal's not noise. That matters because 2 pages later, an engineer logs pulse train stable at low heat, and ring response sequential. Ring. Not coil, not test bed. Ring. Viral truth hook. This is the exact 358 cadence the technician later counted under polygraph, tying 1943 bench work to the 2026 activation. There's a thin stack of shipping receipts to San Nicolas you can hold to light and see bleed through. Unusual cargo, night offload, fenced hardstands. Locals call them pads. The island folklore we heard, night cranes, generators that never shut off, sits right in the gaps where invoices say temporary power assets with no return date. If the basin was the trapdoor, San Nicolas looks like the workshop in the wings. And hydrodynamic wakes keeps popping up in places that aren't about boats. One O&I brief uses it underlined next to corridor. Wakes are pressure scars. Corridors are paths. You underline both when you don't want to say tunnel out loud. The same folder holds a sketch, concentric rings, honeycomb channels, cross-bracing that looks more like a radio than a hull. Someone labeled the center aperture with a simple 3. Not alpha 3. Node 3 isn't a code name there. It's a position in a sequence. The strangest paper is the thinnest, a receipt stamp on a requisition for portable footings salt-resistant, in ring diameters that match the sketch. It's nothing by itself. But a quarter inch to the right, a clerk wrote glass as shorthand for the project line. Not window glass. Hard glass. It wasn't a clever name. It was a practical one, something hard, smooth, and dangerous to handle. Here's the thing about black marker cemeteries. They hide detail but can't erase shape. The gaps line up. You get a recovery posture that starts the week after the guns, shifts to a bench in 1943, standardizes a pulse protocol called asymmetry lock, keeps ordering the same silent fluid for decades, and buries all of it under ONI compartments that never share a full picture. The paper says don't look. The pattern says keep going. One more scrap, and then I'll stop digging in boxes. In a 1943 memo titled Hydrodynamic Assessment, someone typed, observed wake absent at velocity. Then in pencil, network, with a question mark that gouged the page. It's the only time that word shows up in the early files. It reads like a thought a man wasn't paid to have. He wrote it anyway. The 550 knot problem. Water doesn't let you do that. To make sense of the numbers on those slips, you have to feel what water does at speed. Here's the thing. Water isn't air you can bully. Past a few dozen knots, it turns mean. Pressure spikes, drag climbs like a wall, and the boundary layer between hull and ocean starts to tear itself into bubbles. That's cavitation. It sounds like gravel in a blender and eats metal like candy. Push harder, and the heat from collapsing bubbles can pit a prop in hours. Now try to picture 500 knots. The ocean doesn't let you do that. Not with props, not with jets, not with anything we sailed or dreamed in 1943. Cold War boats with massive reactors and perfect screws barely sniffed 40 plus. The Soviets screamed about speed and still lived under 50 except in short bursts. Decades later, engineers got clever and made supercavitating torpedoes, bullets that ride inside a gas bubble to dodge drag. They don't really move through water. They punch a pocket and skate. Even then you hear them. They roar. They leave chaos in their wake. And in the 1940s, nobody on Earth had that trick. So when a tidy ONI hand writes speed observation exceeds torp class by 5, 8x, don't cable. He's breaking the rule every engineer learns in year one. Respect the medium. 5 to 8 times torpedo class puts you into a band where the math says materials fail, bearings melt, sensors blink out, and crew die from shock long before hulls give. If a thing is really doing 500 plus down there, it isn't doing it the way we think of motion. What if the instruments lied? That's the easy out, but the pattern won't let you. A 1940s acoustic tech marks Doppler shifts that map to hundreds of knots. And then 2 decades later, the Navy starts whispering about fast movers on sonar tapes from test ranges. Blips that cross long baselines faster than your watch can keep up. Different years, different gear, same profile. High approach, abrupt pass, no cavitation roar, wake absent at velocity. You can throw out one tape. You can't throw out a family of them that hum the same song. A human note slips in from a 1950s engineer who stared at the plots too long. Either the ocean is lying, or someone cheats drag. That's the line that sits under your skin. Cheating drag means you don't let the boundary layer form the way nature wants. You change the rules at the skin. You make a field that says water. You don't get to bite here. If you could do that, you wouldn't leave a bubble trail. You wouldn't scream. You'd displace without tearing. You'd glide where physics says you should grind. Get this, our best stabs at that trick came decades later with bubble screens, polymer injection, and electric boundary layers. All fussy, all partial, all loud. None of them turned salt water into silence at 500 knots. Yet those old notes keep pointing at movement without the signatures everyone trains to spot. It's like watching footprints across wet sand with no person attached. That's why the technician's polygraphed account hits so hard. It matches the signatures and the silence. Meanwhile, the bench test language from 1943 won't shut up. Asymmetry lock. That reads like a handshake move, a deliberate break in a pretty pattern, so a receiver knows this is me, not noise. In pulse trials, the engineer logs ring response sequential and pulse train stable at low heat. Low heat at high energy is the opposite of cavitation hell. It smells like a system that moves effort around, not through, the medium. That's your viral bridge from Whistleblower to lab note. Same code, same outcome, 83 years apart. Now remember the Santa Monica Basin whisper. Hydrodynamic wakes used next to corridor. Wakes are scars. Corridors are paths. If wakes show up in paperwork where boats aren't supposed to be, maybe you're not tracking a hull. Maybe you're watching a path light up and hand a load from one place to another. Then the 550 knot speed isn't a craft ripping through brine. It's a handoff event measured across 2 points that never see a bubble. The old sonar guys had a way of talking about the fast ones. They'd tap the scope housing and say, "It's like it's already there." That line sounds like a joke until you frame it as routing. If nodes set up pressure corridors, thin, hard tubes of controlled water or not quite water, an object could enter at one ring and exit at another with local displacement, but no traditional wake. Your Doppler sees a transit that maps to impossible speed. All sensors feel a shove. Your eyes see nothing. This is the moment everything changes, because the 550 knot problem stops being a dare to build a better prop and turns into a clue that you shouldn't be building a prop at all. If travel is routing, not raw push, then the ocean's no becomes a quiet yes along certain lines at certain times under certain keys. That pulls the 1943 bench language, the basin geometry, the weird oil sheen riding a seam, and the later fast mover tapes into one frame. It also explains why an ONI chief wrote, "Don't cable." Try summarizing, we watched water cheat itself in a war telegram without sounding drunk. So no, water doesn't let you do that. Not the way we've tried. If a fixed thing in deep water can set the rules along a corridor and pass momentum like a baton, then 550 knots is just the wrong label for the right observation. It's not speed. The network it's permission showing up on not a craft, a node. So if 550 knots is the wrong label, what's the right one? The technician who sat with this thing for years says stop picturing a sub. Picture a fixed structure that doesn't move at all, but makes movement happen. He calls it a node because that's how the logs read, vector in, vector out, no prop wash, no bubbles, but a measurable shove in the water like someone pushed a wall, and the wall handed the push to somewhere else. In his words, the system doesn't travel, it hands off momentum. The logs he showed, cleaner than stories, colder than rumors, list neat pairs. A vector hits an approach window at a certain bearing. The ring lights in sequence, the meters settle, and then, within a blink, another bearing shows a displacement spike. Not a wake, not a trace, a shove. You can't fake that with paperwork because the instruments that feed it don't care about legends. They care about pressure changes and timing. Those paired spikes are the bones of a handoff. Here's where the geometry shows up like a fingerprint. The 1943 bench sketch, concentric rings, honeycomb channels, non-ferrous lattice, matches what the technician saw under dim work lights. A set of nested rings with channels that look too delicate for a hull but perfect for shepherding a field. The outer ring sits heavy and quiet. The inner ring breathes light when the system keys. Between them, a lattice that isn't copper, isn't aluminum, and rings like glass when tapped. That lattice shows up in procurement lines as forbidden alloying elements, and keeps turning up with the same dielectric fluid reorder every couple decades like clockwork. He says when it activates, the inner ring lights segment by segment clockwise, then stalls on one segment, like a skip beat, then finishes the circle and holds. That skip matters. It's an asymmetry lock, the deliberate break that tells another node this isn't ambient chatter. Then, on a good night with a quiet EM floor, the sequence reverses, counterclockwise, like a handshake closing out. If you've ever watched two machines negotiate a connection, it feels the same in your bones, even if the medium is water you can't hear. So why a node and not a craft? Because nothing about the Santa Monica hardware says crew. No life support, no ballast, no control surfaces. Everything points to field shaping. The channels fit the fluid spec. The lattice eats charge and gives shape. The rings set phase and timing. And the logs care about bearings, not courses, angles to fix positions, not tracks across maps. A sailor thinks in tracks. A grid thinks in vectors. Now imagine that grid extended. Ring sites placed on stable shelves like anchor points along a coast. Santa Monica Basin, Monterey Canyon, maybe Guadalupe. Put 3 of them in a loose triangle, and you've got coverage that can hand momentum across big water without pushing through every inch of it. A node wakes on a key, takes a shove from one direction, and passes it along another pre-agreed line. Routing, not running. Travel becomes a permission event that opens, transfers, and shuts. That's why the technician wrote its talking. It felt like scheduling. Meanwhile, ONI kept everyone blind by slicing the work. Oceanographers were told to calibrate acoustics. Electricians serviced environmental dampers. Contractors swapped every 18 months, so nobody watched the whole picture long enough to feel it click. A diver saw a smooth radius object and never saw a ring glow. A bench tech in 1943 validated asymmetry lock and never heard about hydrodynamic corridors. The fluid guy just refilled drums that never boiled. And every time a pattern poked through, SCR, 268 range jumps, harbor glass slips, San Nicolas pads, someone stamped it legacy or temporary and moved the team. The quiet win for this theory is the missing noise. In every event the tech logged, inner ring heat stayed low. If you're muscling water, you pay in heat. If you're shaping a boundary so water can't bite, you pay less, and the meters show it. The handoff reads as low heat, high stability pulses with clean on ramps and off ramps. That matches the old note, wake absent at velocity. You get displacement spikes at entry and exit, not a screaming mess in between. People always ask, if it's a network, who turned it on? Here's a better question, who keeps the clock? The 2026 activation landed inside a solar lull, a rare drop in noise. That's when you schedule a check-in if your language is pulses buried under the planet's hiss. The technician heard the tone in his teeth. Hydrophones caught a chirp with gaps that matched the old bench code. Then, 11 minutes later, Monterey answered with its own narrowed band tap. You don't need intent to prove function. The sequence tells you what the system is built to do. And if we did tag it right, node not craft, the stakes jump. Because a node implies partners. Nodes 1 and 2, somewhere up the coast or deeper out, made Santa Monica matter. That's why the early paperwork wrote node 3 like a position, not a project name. 3 isn't clever. 3 is a slot. So get this, the ocean that night in 1942 may not have hosted a dogfight. It hosted a grid event we mistook for speed. The searchlights chased a shadow because there was nothing to see between handoffs. The basin hid the hardware because it was never meant to move. And the numbers that broke our math were just our instruments watching permission pass along a line we didn't lay. The technician, polygraph, pressure suits, and a midnight shift. He doesn't look like a spy. He looks like a guy you'd ask to fix a breaker.